welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, your RB Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
First of all, thank you for all the support, and we really enjoyed everyone who came through the live stream on Thursday. It was really fun. We had a blast covering the trade deadline, all that stuff. Reacting to all the stuff live. So we really want to start to do live content on a regular basis. So let us know in the comments what you guys want to see from us, live streaming wise.
Yeah, and also shout out to the people who commented in the stream when we got to interact with you guys for different stretches. That was also pretty entertaining and fun.
Yeah, that was great. And last thing is make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at OBT Podcast. And once again, we really appreciate all the support. But the first order of business today is a little shout out, a little mini segment because we kind of touched on it in the last episode, which is Braun officially breaking the scoring record because at the time of our last recording, he hadn't broken it yet. It was kind of a build up kind of thing. And it's just phenomenal that he really broke a record that everyone thought was going to be untouchable.
Yeah, 38,390 points, breaking Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record.
Yep.
Kareem did it in 1984. And then LeBron does it, essentially 38 years later. It's, at this age, just the fact that he was able to do that was kind of cool to see. And, also I thought they did a really good job in terms of like when he got the record, they stopped the game and they, did a little ceremony for him. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
The game was kind of strange, I personally thought. Um, AD, he kind of looked like he was really just out of it.
Yeah.
It seemed like something was going on with him. Westbrook just the whole game just looked like he was really angry, and we'll get into it in the trades, but I think that that probably had something to do with it.
For
Um,
sure.
he got into it with the coaches, but um, moving on from that, uh, you know, pretty awesome. But let's get into the trade deadline. Thursday, uh, it didn't seem like there were quite as many trades as we were looking for. I mean, there were a lot of smaller trades, but I suppose we should kind of start off with Wednesday night, Thursday, early Thursday morning. That big trade, the Phoenix Suns trading for superstar Kevin Durant.
It's crazy, man.
TJ Warren headed out to Brooklyn as well. Um, Brooklyn gets Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, uh, four unprotected first round picks, uh, and then a couple second round picks. There's also kind of like a few other teams involved. Milwaukee got Jay Crowder. Pacers got a couple of, basically like cheap contract buyouts like George Hill, Serge Ibaka. I guess we can start from the Phoenix perspective. That's pretty wild that, the new owner comes in and, basically like his first day on the job, he comes in and just ends up trading for Kevin Durant. And that's the team that Durant wanted to go to. And,
Right.
he had requested that trade in the offseason. Obviously there were a lot of issues, regarding the stuff with going on with Kyrie and, the coach and the GM. But, it's kind of funny because he took back that trade request. It really didn't seem like that he was really taking it back. So you thought at some point maybe if the season went south, but then Brooklyn started winning, and it felt like maybe they finally figured it out. Kyrie was playing really well.
Yeah.
Durant was playing really well before he got hurt, and then all of a sudden Kyrie asked for a trade. Um, doesn't get that contract extension he's looking for, goes to Dallas, and then we kind of thought that maybe Durant might get moved in the offseason, but we didn't really expect a move at the deadline. But
No.
of course, he ends up getting moved. You know, the evening before. So I mean, obviously it's a home run for Phoenix. I mean, you get one of the best players in the league. Obviously, you'll miss Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson, but I mean at the same time, it's Kevin Durant. I mean,
Right.
you got to give up what you got to give up to get Kevin Durant. Um, it's going to be interesting to see how he coexists with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, um, and all those other guys. But this is the team that he wanted. So it's going to be interesting to see how all these people coexist. And I think that this move kind of essentially makes them potentially the favorites in the West
Yeah.
as long as they're healthy.
I know that their championship odds had gone up. I think now
Yeah,
they're like the third most favorited team to win
yeah. I
it.
think from the ninth to the third.
Yeah, so that's an insane jump. That just shows you Katie's value. Um, but one thing I wanted to touch on with this trade was I just found it interesting how they sent KD to his preferred destination, but then when it
Right.
came to Kyrie, they're like, "Yeah, you're not going to your preferred destination. You're not going to LA. You're going to
Yeah.
Dallas."
I think it's kind of just like a lot of those relationships with the front offices and the organizations definitely do matter.
Yeah,
We talked about it in the live stream, where it's just like is Durant, I guess, had built up a pretty positive relationship with Brooklyn. But then at the same time, I mean, when we kind of look at it from Brooklyn's perspective, it just feels like a really just wasted opportunity.
yeah,
I mean, you talk about they had those three guys, Durant, Kyrie, and James Harden, and when they played, they looked awesome together, and they looked like the next big thing, the next super team. Um, in a at a time where it kind of felt like the super team era was kind of going away. Um, but then when you move on, it's like, wow, all those guys requested a trade, like basically, you know, in less than a year's time, and now they're all gone. I mean, getting back Mikal Bridges is nice. I mean, Cam Johnson, that's nice. You got picks, but it just feels like all those three guys. I mean, like, feel like you could have gotten something more. But I wonder with what happened with Brooklyn. I wonder if other teams are gonna continue to experiment with stuff like that because it just seems like that was just a massive failure.
yeah. Uh, I'm thinking that we might be seeing the NBA kind of shift and go back to the duos because it seems like a lot of duos have been running the league thus far. Like we've got De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis. They're on a tear.
Tatum and Brown.
Tatum and Brown, Garland and Donovan
Mitchell.
Mitchell,
Yeah.
Braun and AD were playing fairly well in my opinion. So we'll see. I mean, we really could be seeing that shift. That would not surprise me at all.
Yeah. It's just for me is it just felt a little bit disappointing because like because it just like it felt like we were kind of done with the super team era and I was kind of enjoying like the duos or kind of like the two stars and
Right.
with role players and then now we're kind of back to this super team thing. I mean obviously there's no guarantees in the NBA. You got to be healthy, and I think favorites in the West. I don't know if I'm necessarily ready to crown them like the NBA favorites, but um I don't know. I do like this for Phoenix because again, you got Kevin Durant and you really didn't have to give up as much as you think. I mean, yeah, obviously you got the picks. It's going to be interesting, once you get to like 2028, 2029, 6 years from now, obviously guys like, Durant will probably and Chris Paul will probably be out, but they
Right.
can still readjust over time. I mean, there were rumors Brian Windhorst kind of talked about it. Maybe Kyrie comes in and replaces Chris Paul.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, so there's definitely still flexibility that you can pull off, and you know, even with the buyout market, which we'll kind of talk about towards the end of the podcast, there's still things that you can do. Um, they picked up say like a Darius Paisley, I think, in the trade, at the trade deadline today. But I mean, it's just like I really do like it, but I don't know. It just felt kind of disappointing. I think also it just was disappointing to me because I didn't see it as it happened. Like
Right.
I left my phone for about 15, 20 minutes, and then I come back, and all of a sudden, like, I get Kevin Durant going to Phoenix.
Yeah, I saw it like the second it broke. I was really surprised. It took me off guard completely. Like you said, I thought he was going to get traded in the off season or something else, but I did not expect him to get traded on Wednesday. Like, and I really wish it had happened during our live stream so we could have reacted and gotten some real genuine, our genuine reactions, but and talk about it with everyone. But it is what it is. I'm
Yeah.
happy for Durant. I'm happy for Phoenix. In my opinion, uh, I'm not. I don't know how to feel about all these picks with the Nets. I mean, they have a future, but we aren't gonna see it for a while. Like you said, not till 2029 and all that stuff. So we won't see the full return. So it's too early to call it diminishing returns. But they did get McCall Bridges, Cam Johnson, but I don't know, man. We'll see
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah, and with Brooklyn, they don't have their own picks, so like,
Right.
they're gonna even if they're, so obviously it kind of makes sense to get guys that you can, but like at the same time, how great is this team gonna be? How many games are they gonna win the rest of the way? Obviously, they built up a solid record
Yeah.
before they made the trade, so maybe they won't fall, but so far, but Those picks are going to go to Houston, and it's going to be kind of interesting to see how this team changes because they got a lot of new pieces coming in, and a lot of minutes to dole around.
Yeah, this is shaking up the league entirely, mainly the West, but I'm very
Right.
curious to see where the league goes after this.
Yeah, it definitely felt like with a lot of these trades, they were kind of like I don't want to say like biased, but like they kind of lean more towards the Western Conference making a lot of bigger moves.
Right,
As we get into the second trade, which happened before, we had this massive three-team trade involving the Lakers, the Timberwolves, and the Jazz. So Lakers move on from Russell Westbrook, after essentially like a couple pretty disappointing seasons. I think most people would say, not just from a Westbrook perspective, but also just from a team perspective.
right,
Um, so he goes off to Utah. They also send Juan Toscano Anderson, Damian Jones, and a first round pick for 2027, which is actually top four protected. So potentially, if the Lakers are really bad in 2027, if it's top four, they still get to keep that pick. Um, in return, they get D'Angelo Russell from Minnesota, Malik Beasley, and Jared Vanderbilt. Minnesota, they get Mike Conley, Nikhil Alexander Walker in about 3 seconds. Personally, I liked the trade for LA. Um,
same.
it did kind of feel like it was getting to the point where maybe they kind of needed to move Westbrook out of there. There were reports that it had gotten so bad that they might potentially just buy him out or just waive him or just potentially send him home.
Right,
Um, but at the same time, I think you get three solid players. I know D'Angelo Russell is kind of like a polarizing player. I know there are a lot of people that aren't necessarily big fans of his. I'm not a huge fan, but he is a different player than he was the last time he was in LA. Um, as he's a better, or at least more efficient offensive player, better playmaker. And I think it is a better fit with LeBron. I'm kind of curious to see, you know, the shot selection and all that other stuff, how that kind of transfers over. Malik Beasley, you got as like a shooter, 3-point shooter, gunner. And then Jared Vanderbilt kind of as like a versatile, like defensive forward,
right.
kind of like, you can use him to guard some wings, grab rebounds. Not that much of an outside shooter. Um, occasionally can hit corner threes, but not necessarily somebody you got to guard. But still, you turn Russell Westbrook into three solid quality players. And I don't think you can necessarily complain about that
No,
from a Laker perspective.
yeah. I think you guys are definitely one of the winners. And I'm a big D'Lo fan. I think I've stated this on the podcast. So seeing him go
And,
back to LA is it's kind of a dream come true for a D'Lo fan. Like it's
and
a
in a way, you
redemption
kind of
arc.
called it.
Yeah, I definitely did say it
Hmm.
and brought it up a couple times, but I'm just happy for D'Lo. I'm happy for the Lakers because you guys are filling a void that you needed, a playmaking shooting point guard.
Yeah.
Because I think D'Lo's shooting like around 40% from three,
Yeah. He's having
and
one of his, probably his most efficient season.
yeah, so and that was a struggle that you guys needed to address from the get go. So I'm glad you guys got D'Lo. As for Beasley, I think that also adds some shooting and some athletic ability. Um,
Yeah.
so that's a good void to fill as well. And like you said, you got rid of Westbrook because I think that's all that really matters outside of the things that I just mentioned because I just don't think he was the right fit for you guys in your system, locker room, whatever. And I think there was a quote earlier that said when something along the lines of you remove a vampire or something like that from the locker
Yeah.
room. So clearly they weren't getting along in there.
It
But
definitely does feel like that they kind of like, now that he's gone, kind of like, putting out a lot of this stuff.
yeah, I mean, hopefully he doesn't turn into a scapegoat. I'm not wishing that on him.
Right.
I'm not blaming. I'm just going along with the speculation. But um, yeah, I think you guys pulled um, a great a great haul on this one.
Yeah. And then I guess if you want to move on to the Minnesota part of it, you get Mike Conley. Um, obviously not the same as he was,
Right.
years ago, but he is a good fit, I think, next to Gobert as a pick and roll partner. I think probably also as a locker room guy, probably a little bit better than D'Angelo Russell.
Oh, for sure.
Also just to get kind of like a veteran, kind of responsible adult guy kind of in there. So, And I mean, I guess with the Gobert thing, like you kind of already almost have to kind of treat that as sort of like a sunk cost, anyways, potentially. So I kind of look at it as, well, you have him there, so you might as well try to make the most of it. And I think Mike Conley can help with that.
Yeah. Um, because I remember I had mentioned on the podcast a rumor that it came about that the Timberwolves are looking to move on from D'Lo, not
Right.
necessarily because of his stats or the numbers he was putting up, but more so the locker room thing. So I think they just wanted somebody that the team can really rally around because it doesn't seem like they rally around Gobert. Cat is
Right.
always hurt. Ant is too young, I think, uh, and nobody else is on that mid tier or higher tier caliber. So
Right.
I think bringing in Mike Conley is more like you said a locker room move, but he'll definitely fit that system with pick and roll for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
He's played with
Um,
some really good big men that have excelled in the pick and roll.
yeah. And then, moving on to Utah, they get Westbrook, who they'll probably buy out, a couple of the other Laker guys that weren't really playing. And then they get that Laker first. It does kind of feel like that they were sort of selling low, but as we kind of see with a lot of these trades, a lot of the asking prices that a lot of these guys were going for ended up not being as high as people thought they were going to be. There were
Right.
lots of trades involving like a ton of second round picks. Um, if we want to move on into the next one, say Yaka Pirtle, a guy that had come up in, a number of trade rumors we had discussed, center for the Spurs. Toronto gets him. Spurs get Kem Birch, 2024 first round pick protected, and two future second round picks, 2023, 2025. Um, in a lot of the previous rumors, it was kind of suggested that he might go for not just one, but two first round picks.
Right.
Personally, I thought that was a little bit high. I think he is a good player, but I don't know. Two first round picks seem kind of high to me, and apparently, uh, the market said that. Toronto was kind of a team that a lot of people suggested were going to be sellers at the deadline, but they ended up not really trading anybody. I mean, they ended up trading for a player, Jakob Poeltl. I mean, they needed a center.
Yeah.
I do kind of wonder what their situation is going to be moving forward. But I guess you can look at it from the perspective of you got a guy that you needed. You're going to re-sign him. He's going to be a part of your team for the foreseeable future. So I don't think you can necessarily complain about that one.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I actually like this move a lot, and it seems like this trade deadline was more of like a homecoming one in some
Yeah, for
sense.
sure.
Like a lot of people returned back to places that they were drafted or had
Right.
some sort of roots or history with. Like
Angelo Russell.
yeah, we'll get into them later, but like John Wall with Houston, like I mean he's most likely going to be bought out, but him coming back to Houston, George Hill,
Right.
a
Hmm.
bunch of guys. So I'm
Yeah.
very curious to see how any of these shape out if
Hmm.
um, they're not bought out, but I think they most likely will.
Right. Moving on into the next few trades, we also had a four-team trade between the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Magic. So Denver, they got Thomas Bryant, backup center for the Lakers. Um, I think while AD was out, he played a really good role. I think
Yeah.
as a guy that can get you some rebounds, get you a lot of offense. Not necessarily a great defender. Reportedly, um, part of him getting traded was he actually had requested to be traded because since AD had come back, his playing time had kind of decreased. I'm curious how much playing time he's going to get in Denver, considering Nikola Jokic is the center there.
Right.
But as a backup center, I think he's in the at least in the regular season. He plays hard. He competes out there. He's just not that good of a defender. Reportedly the Lakers are going to probably move to Wenyen Gabriel, potentially for those big man minutes. But then at the same time, they also traded for another center. So in this trade, they got Mo Bamba, former lottery pick for the Orlando Magic.
Great pickup.
Devon Reed, second round pick. Personally, I don't know. Mo Bamba has been kind of, I don't know, a little bit polarizing. Personally, I haven't really been all that impressed with him so far in his career. He had a
Right.
stretch at different points where he played pretty well, but I am kind of curious to see what he looks like on the Lakers. I think he could potentially be one of those second draft type of players where their first stint doesn't really necessarily work out. and then they go to other teams and they, look a lot better. Say like a Malik Monk, right?
Right.
He was in Charlotte. Didn't really look all that great in Charlotte, and then he comes to LA and has a really good season with them, and then turns that into a contract for the Kings, and now he's a really good player.
Yeah.
So I think as long as it turns out like that, I think it makes sense. Again, we needed another backup big man, so I think that makes a lot of sense. For the Clippers, they get Bones Highland. It felt like his time in Denver was kind of coming to an end. His minutes had kind of dwindled.
Right.
Even when they were resting guys and sitting guys in different games, he wasn't really playing.
Right.
It seemed like his playing style didn't necessarily mesh with what the coaches wanted. He's more of like a score first point guard. Even though I do like certain aspects of his game, but I can see, why Denver probably wasn't all that pleased with how he was doing. And the Clippers didn't really give up a lot to get him. They only gave up like a couple seconds.
Yeah.
So, I think, it makes sense for them to try to get like another, guard in there. But I don't know. This one was kind of weird just because it didn't feel like the Clippers really needed a scoring guard. But he's young, um, and it's such a low cost. So I mean, I don't think that this necessarily is bad at all. I think this is
Yeah.
fine.
I think I like that move a lot.
Yeah. And then moving on to Orlando, they get Patrick Beverly. So Patrick Beverly from Obamba. Um, Lakers didn't give up any first; they just gave up a second
Right.
that they got from Denver. My guess is he's probably a buyout guy. I can't imagine he probably sticks around on Orlando.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure where he would go. Some people have mentioned Minnesota, but I think that there's other teams he could go to. But
Easily.
yeah, we'll kind of get into that more so as we get into the buyouts.
Yeah.
Then we had a couple of smaller trades like Atlanta uh, between Justin Holiday, Frank Kaminsky for Houston, and then Garrison Matthews and Bruno Fernando going to Atlanta. But then also we had another trade involving the Warriors,
Yeah.
right? So I believe it was James Wiseman headed to Detroit. Sadiq Bey headed to Atlanta, right?
Yep.
Um, so
Yeah.
obviously with Wiseman, he was the second pick of the draft. Hadn't really panned out for Golden State. I think, for him, I don't necessarily think he's a bad player at all. I think it was just kind of a tough situation to be in. When he was drafted by Golden State initially, they had come off a losing season where they weren't really competing. Um, and then he kind of gets to a point where now all of a sudden, a couple seasons later, Clay's back. Uh, you know, Wiggins is back or Wiggins is traded there, so they're trying to win games, and he just wasn't necessarily going to be able to help with that. I think if he's in like a team like on a team like Detroit, where he doesn't really have to do quite as much, he can kind of just play a little bit more free. As a young player, I think he can probably put up some numbers. Um, so I think, and then also for Golden State, you kind of free up some money
Yeah.
with this deal. To get to kind of like eliminate some of that tax that they have to pay because it's such an expensive roster.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gary Payton, right? I believe goes from Portland to Golden State.
Yep. Homecoming. Another one.
Yeah, another homecoming. I do think that this kind of helps Golden State. Obviously, it seemed like they really did miss him as another defensive guard. They kind of used him when he was there, sort of like a big, as a screener, roller,
Yeah.
cutter. Since he's not like a great outside shooter, but
And he's got
I do
hops.
like it for. Yeah, exactly. He's athletic. He plays hard. I think that they really do miss him. So I do kind of like that. And I mean, if you're gonna swap Gary Payton and James Wiseman, I guess that's an upgrade if you're Golden State. But I don't know. I may be a little bit lower on Golden State's deadline than others, but we'll get into that as we continue.
Yeah. I mean, with Wiseman, like, it seemed more like you said, a money move. I think you said that earlier. Like, more of a money move.
Right.
Getting rid of salary and stuff like that. But also, it seemed more like a give up move to me. Like, it just seemed like the Warriors were kind of just washing their hands of Wiseman
Right.
because he
Right.
hadn't really done anything for them. But I think he's going to be a player where a change of scenery helps him in his career and boosts him to that next level. So I'm rooting for him on that.
Yeah. And speaking of the Blazers, so they were involved in a three-team deal. Jalen McDaniels from Charlotte headed to Philly. Matisse Thybulle from Philly to Portland. I mean, for me, um, I like this deal mainly for Philly. For Portland, it's okay. I do
Right.
like Matisse Thybulle. He's a really good defensive player, but his offense is really rough. Um, I guess playing next to Anthony Simons and Damian Lillard, you don't necessarily have to do as much on offense.
Mm-hmm.
But for Philly, you get Jalen McDaniels, tall, athletic wing, good scorer, good defender. I think this makes a lot of sense for Philly.
Oh yeah.
I'm kind of disappointed that Charlotte, it felt like sold really low. And we'll kind of get into this, again, as we talk about the winners and losers and all that. But it felt like a lot of Charlotte's deals were like that. Mason Plumlee had to do the Clippers for Reggie Jackson. That was another kind of bizarre trade, in my opinion. I mean, what did you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was really bizarre. It came out of nowhere for me, but I don't really have much to say because that's how odd it was.
Yeah.
You know.
Um, yeah. Another small one. Pelicans getting Josh Richardson from the Spurs, Devontae Graham from the Pelicans to the Spurs. This one was kind of, I liked it for mainly just because I think Josh Richardson is an upgrade over Devontae Graham. It is kind of interesting because they have so many forwards and wings, and you're kind of adding another one with Richardson. But I guess if you're in New Orleans, you want some shooting and you get more defense because Devontae Graham, he had an interesting story a few years ago, but he's been a really efficient player. I mean, he's generally like from the field been in like the 30%, 30 something percent from the field.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is an upgrade, personally to me.
Yeah. Um, I loved it. In the stream, I said this was one of my favorite trades because I think Richardson fits into their system so perfectly because he's a spot up player and he's great at defense, and that's all they really need. Because I don't think Devonte Graham fit that because he's not a good defender and he fell out of the rotation completely.
Right.
So now they get somebody who's going to be playing. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Richardson's definitely going to be playing, so we could see him get some significant minutes and help them
Right.
get that system back before that they had going before both their stars were injured. So,
Yeah. And then kind of to get into the funniest trade, in my opinion,
mm-hmm.
Eric Gordon, another homecoming going to the Clippers.
Yep.
Luke Kennard from the Clippers to the Grizzlies. And then, of course, the Rockets getting John Wall, another homecoming. Danny Green, 3 second-round picks,
Oh man.
and a pick swap with the Clippers. Um, I guess from a guard perspective, I mean, Luke Kennard versus Eric Gordon. I mean, I feel like I would personally probably prefer to have Luke Kennard,
Yeah,
just because
same.
of the age. But I guess Eric Gordon is, he's older. I guess he's got one more year left on his deal. And if you're the Clippers, I guess John Wall. It seemed like they were probably done with him anyways.
Yep.
He seemed to have issues with injuries. It didn't seem like a great fit necessarily. So, I mean, definitely interesting. And then for the Grizzlies, it was kind of disappointing that that was the only guy that they picked up. I mean, it makes sense to pick up a shooter, since Memphis has really struggled a lot of time in a lot of games with their outside shot. And then for Houston, I mean, I think these are buyout guys. I mean, I don't think these guys really have a real future with the team.
No.
I mean, Wall was on a podcast talking about how horrible his time in
Yeah.
Houston
We
was, so I
talked
can't
about
imagine
it.
he'd stick around long term.
Yeah. And like, I just don't think Houston is looking for any veterans like to really add to the roster. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because they just got rid of Eric Gordon, so clearly they didn't want a veteran. And
yeah,
John Wall
and
is definitely not getting any minutes. Danny Green, I don't see getting any minutes either.
right.
So they're definitely getting bought out.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because there are times where like I do think that there's kind of value to having
Yeah,
like a veteran guy on the team. Just when you look at some of these teams like Houston feels kind of like a mess. So
terrible.
it kind of seems like it would be nice to have like just a veteran guy who doesn't necessarily care about whether or not he's playing or getting minutes on the team. But I think John Wall really does want to play. So Danny Green, I don't necessarily know, but you know, yeah, I don't think these guys are really a part of their future.
And Green was hurt for a while. Am I
Yeah, he had the
okay?
torn ACL in the playoffs last year.
Yeah,
He had come back basically this month, so he hadn't really played in a whole lot of games.
right.
Um, I don't necessarily know if he goes anywhere. I mean, he hasn't really done a ton this season. Obviously, he's got size, he can shoot.
Yeah,
But I feel like he might be closer to being done. But we'll see where he goes.
Yeah, should be interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, were pretty much all the trades that we saw. At least with the trade deadline, I think one of the main takeaways was like, yeah, the asking prices definitely went down.
Yeah,
We saw a lot of second round picks move around, which I guess makes sense because the thing with second round picks is, some teams value them more than others. But
right.
I mean, on average, I don't think usually you typically see like a lot of amazing players in the second round. I mean, there obviously are some, but if you're going to use those to get like a impact player right now, I think that that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, my
Um,
philosophy on like the second round picks is like, especially for teams who value them, I feel like they live by that one man's trash is another man's treasure kind of thing, where it's like, like you said, people have different values, and the economy is so weird when it comes to second round picks. So some people will give up like four or five, and then
right.
some won't even give those up because they value them that much. But they can turn into some gems and really good rotational players. But
Yeah.
like I said, one man's trash, another man's treasure. So
And then, we saw a couple of guys that, there were a lot of trade rumors surrounding, but they ended up not getting moved. Boyan Bogdanovic for
yeah,
Detroit. Um, yeah, there were definitely rumors pointing to that they were probably going to keep him. It seemed like they really value him. And,
right.
again, I think that there's value in having a guy like that, who's a veteran who can play, who can kind of, mesh and gel with a lot of the young guys. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. A part of me thought that he might get moved somewhere just because I
Same.
thought that maybe a team might overpay, to try to get him, but he ended up not getting moved.
Right. Yeah, I thought the Lakers were gonna swoop in and get him, but that didn't happen.
Yeah. Um, and then another guy, that had been talked about, OG Anunoby, as we
The
were on the
man.
live stream, reportedly there were teams like the Warriors and the Grizzlies and the Pelicans that were kind of like, really trying to uh, trade for him, and giving up a lot to try to get him.
Yeah.
We had talked about him on the podcast. 3 first round picks seemed like a really high asking price. And it seems like the other teams thought so as well because he ended up staying.
Right.
Reportedly, Woj put out that Toronto said that they learned a lot in terms of learning about the values of their players. I mean,
Yeah.
personally, to me, that feels kind of like spin, but it's whatever. Um, I don't know. During the live stream, when they were saying that, it felt like maybe he got moved, but as it got closer to 3, it was like, nah, he probably
Yeah.
would have moved. I just think the asking price was too high for him.
Yeah. And we ourselves said if we were in the GM seats, we wouldn't do 3 first rounds. Like that's too high of an asking price.
Yeah, like, with Golden State, I'm curious what it would have been if it had happened. My guess is probably like Kaminga, maybe, maybe Wiseman too, and then maybe like a couple first. I don't know. I mean, we said on the stream that we would probably do it, but at the same time, not for 3 first round picks.
No.
Yeah,
Two at the
maybe
max.
exactly. Yeah, especially if you're gonna throw Kaminga in there, because I
Yeah.
still kind of like Kaminga at
I believe
times.
in him.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but at the end of the day, like I said, I just think the asking price was too high.
I probably would
You
have done um probably Kaminga and Moody maybe. I don't know about Wiseman, but definitely Kaminga and Moody. Um but like we said earlier, that could have been a give up move with Wiseman, so
Right.
I low key do like Wiseman and Kaminga for OG a little bit better, but
Yeah. And then I guess we can kind of move into for us winners, losers. Since we talked about all the trades, I would definitely say the Lakers are one of the
oh
winners
yeah,
of the deadline. I mean, for me, I think a lot of the reasons are you get rid of Russell Westbrook and you turn that into decent players. Even if you don't necessarily do anything this year, it still helps you for, next year in terms of flexibility and
right,
giving you some young guys on this team, that have tradable contracts and, guys that could potentially turn out to be really good. Um, the Suns, I think they are the obvious winners of the deadline
yeah,
considering they got the best player. Uh,
undisputed,
I mean, and this completely changes their fortunes. I think, they were winning games and they were looking better, but you didn't necessarily feel that great about picking them coming out of the West. But now with Durant, if they're healthy, it definitely feels like they're gonna be the favorites.
right,
I thought the Clippers did a decent job.
Me too.
of picking up some extra guys. They needed an extra big man. I don't think you could roll in with just Ivica Zubac, even though he's been good.
Mm-mm.
Um, you know, I'm curious what they do with their guard situation. They moved on from both Reggie Jackson and John Wall.
Right.
Terrence Mann has been starting at the point guard spot. So this, we're gonna get into the buyouts, but it feels kind of like a Russell Westbrook move could
100%.
potentially happen there. I'm curious to see, but I did like the moves that they made for the most part. Um, what were your winners?
Um, my winners are pretty much the same. Definitely Suns at the top. Lakers number two, and it was close because I really like your starting lineup. I really like that for you guys because with Mo Bamba, we didn't really touch on it, but I think he could be more of like a JaVale McGee kind of player where you kind of focus on him catching lobs and dunking, and then on defense he's kind of like a defensive
Shot
anchor of some
blocker.
sorts. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, and you can
I
add in a
really
little
like
bit
that.
of a 3-point shot.
Yeah, I really like that. So
Mm.
yeah, you guys are definitely the two winners. I don't really have a third one because I just feel like everything else was a little bit lackluster. If I'm gonna be honest, like there was a lot of moves, but none of them were really that substantial. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for me, losers, I think the Grizzlies have got to be one of them. They
Yeah.
had been kind of struggling lately, and it feels like that they kind of needed a little bit more of a deal.
Right.
I thought that they might go all in on OG Anunoby, but they ended up just settling for Luke Kennard. I mean, again, it helps them with the shooting, but I don't necessarily know if this is like a home run move. I don't think so. Um, Charlotte, definitely one of them. I feel like the stuff they gave up, they didn't really get anything back for them.
Yeah.
I know they're a team that's like, trying to lose, but feels like you could have at least gotten something back for some of the guys you got. Um, Portland, I think, is another one. A lot of their moves were kind of cost-cutting moves to me. It felt like, even though like some of those guys are decent players, right? Like Josh Hart, I think is a good player.
Yeah.
Like Gary Payton, I think is a good player. Um, but I don't know. For me, the Warriors, I don't know if I don't. I kind of go back and forth. I don't necessarily know if losers is the right term, but I feel like it's a little bit underwhelming. I guess you could
Yeah.
argue getting Gary Payton makes them better, but I feel like they needed to do a little bit more for my
I
taste.
wanted to see him go. OG go to the Warriors. I really wanted to see that.
Yeah. Um. So for you, your losers were they kind of similar, or were they a little bit different?
Well, I have to put the Nets at number one, and the reason
Yeah.
why is because they lost two stars, but
Right.
they didn't get any stars back. You know what I mean? Like I could
Yeah.
understand if it was a star for star, then I can't really call it a loss. But you lost arguably one of the best ball handlers of all time, and you lost one of the best scorers of all time.
Yeah.
And it may not be because you failed them, but I don't know. It's just a weird situation where I have to scratch it off as a L because you lost two of the best players in the NBA in a
I had
matter
them
of
in a
three
special.
days. Like,
I had them in a special section where I just said what,
oh,
and they
okay,
were all by
sorry,
themselves.
didn't mean to spoil that, but yeah, Nets are my losers. Warriors too, because they missed out on OG, and also Memphis too. They could have gotten OG as well, and I think once again it's not necessarily their fault, but because I feel like Toronto was just asking for too much, but I can't help but put them in the losing category.
Yeah. I think in terms of teams I thought did fine, Boston, they got Mike Muscala, I guess, as a big man upgrade. It would have been interesting to see if they had gotten another forward.
Yeah,
Um, but again, as we get into, they may be another buyout team. Denver, like I said, Thomas Bryant, I think, is a solid addition as another center.
right.
Um, but again, it felt like they could have done a little bit more.
Yeah,
Um, Atlanta, I've kind of put them in the sort of just meh section. I like Sadiq Bey as an addition.
yeah,
Um, But, other than that, I mean, they kept John Collins. That was another name that was in the trade market. We personally didn't think that they should have traded him. Like we thought that they should keep him,
right.
because I think he's a really good fit there. Um, Toronto, I also kind of had as another mad team. I was kind of hoping to see that they might, start selling their guys off. We both thought that they shouldn't necessarily do that, but I was
Yeah,
kind of hoping to see it.
yeah,
But at the very least, they did add another big man in Jakob Pertl,
yeah.
because they definitely needed that.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be enough to turn them around anytime soon. But I, you know, I feel like they're also in the losing category. They have to be because they built up all this hype about moving Van Vliet, moving OG Ananobi, but they didn't really move anybody. So, but they did acquire Jakob Pertl. So I guess that is technically a win. So I guess they're in like the middle.
Yeah, maybe you can put Toronto fans in the losers
Yeah.
category. Maybe they're hoping for something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of wrap it up, and then we also have potential buyouts. Obviously there's going to be guys on, that are on teams that were kind of moved as salary that we know are going to go somewhere else. Russell Westbrook, obviously, it's towards the top of the list.
Yeah.
Um, you know, on Utah, probably not going to play a single minute there. Probably not even going to report or show up. Um, I think he probably ends up going to the Clippers.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if that's going to happen. I personally wouldn't do it if I'm the Clippers, just because of what we just saw the last couple of seasons. But you know, they didn't really add any real point guards other than Bones, so I could definitely see them doing that. What do you think?
Yeah, I would if I were the Clippers, I would definitely go after that. And he would fit in their system, I think, because they're in desperate need of a true point guard because we all know Terrence Mann is not a one. He's really just there for defense. But somebody in our chat in the live stream was brought up Russell Westbrook to Miami in a buyout, and
Yeah,
we were
that's
just
kind of
like
annoying.
we were just like okay, maybe, but then we were like, well, that team doesn't really have a lot of shooting if he's on there.
Yeah,
So I just feel like the best fit for him is definitely the Clippers because, you know,
yeah,
and also I didn't even think of this till just now. He used to play with Paul George in OKC and they did fairly
right.
well together. I didn't have any issues with that duo.
Yeah, and
Um
I think they had a pretty good relationship there,
yeah,
so I could definitely see the players on the Clippers probably advocating for it. But
yeah. I
all I
think
would
he would
just say
fit.
is, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. And we can both speak from experience with having him on our team. So,
Yeah. Um, Next guy, another guy, Reggie Jackson. Reportedly, Chris Haynes kind of mentioned, that the Suns are kind of a team to look out for. Kind of interesting. I mean, they already have Cameron Payne. I mean, I guess you could argue Reggie Jackson is probably a better player than Cameron Payne, but
somewhat.
I don't know. It feels a little bit redundant to me. But I guess as another bigger-ish guard, that can score off the dribble. I mean, I guess I could kind of see it, but I don't know. That one doesn't really make that much sense to me. But I guess they're a team that needs a little bit more depth since they made the trades.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind seeing Reggie Jackson on the Wizards. I'm not gonna lie, because
Yeah,
I feel like we just need another guard. Um, but as of late, we've been doing okay. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's so hard to fit Reggie Jackson in there because I feel like he could be a starter on a lot of teams, but also a really good backup. So I feel like
yeah,
you can kind of plug and play him. So I'm curious to see where he goes actually.
yeah. Well, you mentioned the Wizards needing another guard. Moving on to this one, how about a former Wizards guard, John Wall?
Yeah,
Uh, it seems like again, according to Chris Haynes, he's probably going to get bought out.
yeah,
And be a guy on the free agent market. Again, kind of interested to see where he goes. It
right.
was kind of looked at when he was signed as like a really big addition, and he started off playing pretty well, but then it seemed like he got hurt and kind of just fell out of the rotation. So I do kind of wonder where he goes. Um, I don't know. This one is kind of a tough one to figure out because again, it's like anywhere he goes, I feel like is probably as a backup at this point.
Yeah,
Maybe if he goes
unfortunately.
to DC, he's a starter, but I don't know. I mean, a lot of the good teams I feel like are pretty solid at the point guard position. So I'm kind of curious to see where he goes.
Yeah, you guys already know. I've been advocating for John Wall to come back to the Wizards since it was announced that they could potentially be buying him out over there. But I don't know. I don't want to speak on it too much because first of all, I don't want to get people's hopes up or my own, to be honest. But we could be looking at a situation where the management kind of soured the relationship between him and the management soured. But I really want to see him come home. I feel like we wouldn't just cut him like that, like a lot of these other teams have. But I don't know, man. Like you said, it's a tough predicament because first of all, he's an injury prone point guard.
Right?
He's older, so he's lost a lot of his explosiveness that he was known for. And like you said, most of the league has the point guard slot uh, filled and the backup one too. And they're really good or really solid. So I just don't know where he would fit outside of the Wizards. I can't really think of anywhere else. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also not a great outside shooter, kind of similar to
Nope.
Russ, even though they're different players, but still.
Yeah.
Um, Moving on to the next one, a guy on the Wizards
Yeah.
that gets bought out, Will Barton. He came over from Denver in that trade that sent KCP to Denver, or yeah, Caldwell Pope to
Right.
Denver. Um, you know, Played for the Wizards at times, and then kind of just fell out of the rotation. Had a pretty good season last year, so I feel like he still probably has something left
Right.
in the tank. I do kind of wonder if he goes to, probably another playoff type team, to help somebody out. But this one, I was initially kind of surprised because I didn't really expect them to buy him out, but they did. So now he's kind of free to go wherever he wants.
Yeah. And I don't know what to say about this because I feel like we never used him correctly. I don't know. It seemed like there were points where he was in the game where he shouldn't have been. Then there were points where he wasn't in the game where he should have been. And then it just completely dropped off. Like I had completely forgotten he was on our roster until like a few weeks ago when they mentioned his name coming up in trade rumors. But yeah, I he's a great player in my opinion. He's a scorer and he's got hops. He I feel like he still has something left in the tank like you said and something to prove. So, I'm curious to see where he goes.
Dwayne Dedman, guy, who's backup big man for Miami. Um, I don't know. I don't necessarily know if he really goes anywhere. I mean, was okay, but I don't know. I don't necessarily know if there's like a huge need for him on a lot of teams. I guess you could have like a cheap option as a backup center. He
Yeah.
can kind of shoot, kind of defend, but he's also really slow. I feel like he's kind of declined the last couple of years. I mean, again, the fact that Miami got rid of him and they're not like a great team,
Right.
kind of speaks volumes, I guess, about, maybe he's just kind of like he might just be out of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a thing where we're seeing regression with some of these guys and yeah, I just don't think he has enough to really fight for a spot on a roster to be honest, especially after this move like you said, a mediocre team cuts a player. That's never a good sign.
Right. Danny Green, another guy, veteran player, 3-and-D. Again, he had an ACL tear in last year's playoffs, so I
Right.
feel like he's probably another guy where maybe he latches onto a team, but if, I doubt he plays a whole lot. I feel like he's another guy that's probably close to being done.
Yeah. Um I don't know. I'm not ready to give up on him just yet. Like you said with the injury, that's hard to come back from. But I don't think we'll ever see the old Danny Green like San
No,
Antonio or LA or even
no.
Toronto. But I feel like he can probably still be a good spot up. I'm just not too sure on his defense or his driving ability. So he might be relegated to more of a corner sitter. You know what I mean?
Then kind of a fun one, Patrick Beverly. I feel like he's probably another guy that's going to get bought out. I'm kind of curious to see where he goes.
Yeah.
I feel like a team like a Denver, or somebody like that, could use him. I mean, because they don't really necessarily need like a ball handling guard, just
Right.
somebody that you can put out there, for a few minutes that can defend guys. But again, he kind of struggled in LA this season, um, especially early on when his shot wasn't falling. He had been playing better as of late, but it doesn't feel like he can really start for a lot of teams anymore. Maybe as a role player, he can give you some, stretches, but again, at this point, probably best as a backup guard.
Yeah.
Certainly not a wing, the way they used him in LA.
No. Like you said, I think he's more of a rotational player, not nowhere near starting caliber, especially with how dense the guard talent is around the league. I just don't. I can only see him being, you know, backup or another rotational guy.
And then, kind of, I guess, to conclude, a name that had sort of been mentioned as a buyout candidate, but then at the same time, you know, maybe they're not going to buy him out. Some reports say Kevin Love, playing for Cleveland. Kind of, again, another guy that kind of fell out of the rotation. Played early in the season and played pretty well, but,
Right.
again, the minutes have dwindled, so he's probably done there if I had to guess. I mean, maybe he doesn't get bought out, but I mean, I can't see him probably staying too much longer.
Yeah. Um, I mean, he's just getting old. Simple as that.
Yeah,
I think that's all I really have to say is he's old.
right.
And with age comes regression, and you're not the same that you used to be. So
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
yeah. The difference with him is he's got a big contract. He's in the last year of his deal, to be fair. But again, it's around like almost 30 million.
Oh
So,
yeah, you're right.
I mean, Cleveland is a team, now that they got Garland, Mitchell, Allen, and they're gonna have to start paying these guys. I don't know. That's kind of a lot of money to just buy out a guy, especially for a team like Cleveland that's trying to compete. So it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if he just kind of just stayed there, but who knows at this point.
I think we might see a Haslam situation where he's kind of just around because he's nowhere near as old as Haslam, but
Right? He's 34, I think.
yeah, but I feel like we might see a Haslam situation where they kind of keep bringing him back to be the locker room presence, and he's done a lot for the community of Cleveland and that city, so I think he stays. I don't see them buying him out. I just don't see the return value that you get in that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, pretty much overall, the Thursday of the trade deadline, I think was, not quite as, you know, wow or eye popping as we thought, but
Yeah,
definitely, Wednesday made up early, late Wednesday night, definitely made up for that with the Durant trade.
yeah,
So I think it's going to be interesting to see how these teams, kind of shift through everything for the last, 30-ish games of the season.
right.
Obviously with the Lakers, they've kind of basically like, created a whole new team basically. Phoenix, obviously, you bring in Kevin Durant. Team isn't completely different, but obviously, it's an adjustment to play with a guy like that. But I do
Yep,
feel like he's still a plug and play player, so it's going
easily.
to be interesting to see over the rest of the season and into the playoffs how these teams do.
Right. Can't wait.
Yeah, this pretty much wraps up the Off Ball Takes podcast covering the trade deadline. So thanks everybody for your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below maybe what your favorite trades are
Yeah.
or what your least favorite trades are. Thanks for everything, and we'll see you next week.